All right. Well, it's good to see everybody. And let me check what's going on over here. I'm just making sure I'm live on all my platforms before we get going. And 1 second.
Hello. I think I got
All
it.
right. Hey, Jesse, good to see you.
Hello. Good to see you.
And let me share one more
Evening.
place. Um, okay. All right. So we are ready to. Oh, no, one more. So good evening, everybody. It's great to see you. Starting this class on the eve of a important hockey game for Tampa Bay people. Reminds me of the old joke of the man who comes to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I have a real big problem." And the rabbi says, "What?" He says, "Listen, Yom Kippur is falling out of the World Series, and the Yankees are in the World Series. Uh, what should I do? Yom Kippur services, World Series." And the rabbi says, "Okay, come on, don't you know that's why they invented VCR?" And so the man says, "What do you mean, Rabbi? I can record your service?" Okay, so obviously we want it the other way around. If you miss part of the game, trust me, it's going to be recorded. And I trust you'll at least watch the highlights. But I imagine if you miss the class, you're much less likely to watch the highlights of the class. No, but that could be wrong. I was gratified to hear someone before the class. I asked them, when should I do this class? It's coming up the hockey game. And he said, listen, there's priorities in life, and the class is a priority. So that's good to hear. So on that note, let's delve right into what we're talking about. And once again, good evening to everybody. And thank you for coming. And hopefully we get into some good discussion. And as usual, although I said a joke, but I have to say a joke that's connected to the actual class. So as I always say, let me tell a joke that's not funny. So the joke goes like this. A little girl is sitting on her grandfather's lap, and she feels her grandfather's face and says, "Oh my gosh, Grandpa, your face is really rough." He says, "Yeah." And then she feels her face and says, "Well, my face is really soft." And she says, "Grandpa, is it true that you're really old? That's why your face is really rough?" And he says, "Yeah." And she says, "Is it true that I'm really young and that's why my face is really soft?" He says, "Yeah." So she says, "Well, Grandpa, I think as time progresses, the world is getting better." And so what's the idea behind the joke? In her mind, she just thinks, the world's gotten better. And so now people are born with softer faces. But that's kind of the idea. When we get into resurrection, it kind of brings up that idea that suddenly, you know, generally we have this idea of erosion and things are slowly disintegrating. And what do they say? 2 billion years, the world's going to destroy itself from the sun or whatever else it is. But in Judaism, we believe there's actually going to come a point where things are going to reverse, where those who are dead are going to come back alive again. And so over the next 3 weeks, we are going to do a deep dive into Judaism and the resurrection. If you've been with us for the whole year in the classes, we've been discussing the topics of Mashiach for a while already, but we will be getting into resurrection. By the way, there is a textbook. You don't have to order it. It just goes along. If you want, it's available on Amazon. There's a link to it somewhere. I will be sharing the text, though, on the screen. And so what we're going to discuss today in the resurrection is A, what is the source of resurrection? B, is why is there such an emphasis in Judaism on resurrection? In other words, once we see the sources, we'll see resurrection is pretty popular. And C, why is the climax of all creation to be found in the body and not the soul? So I want to say, if you've been around for a while, you've probably heard a lot of these ideas that I will present today, spread out amongst my different classes. Today, though, we'll be getting into a lot of the sources and focus specifically on the resurrection and that question in and of itself. So first, I like to start with a question because that gets you thinking. It's not just about me presenting ideas, but let's start with a question. And the question we want to start with today is, what do you think makes the religion of Judaism unique? What do you think makes the religion of Judaism unique? You can put in the chat. You can talk. What do you think it is? Or let's put it up on the screen so that way people will. Why not? Any thoughts over here? What makes Judaism unique? I gotta open up my chat. National revelation. Okay, good. That's a good one. Judaism has a national revelation, which other religions don't have. All the Jewish people were there on Mount Sinai when God spoke to them. How about in the core principles? What core principles in Judaism are different than, or that make it unique? Any thoughts?
I think one of the things that may encompass several other things basically is the presenting ideas that really cannot be believed except by faith. Like they're unbelievable, really.
Right. Okay. So you're saying ideas that wouldn't be believed other than faith. I would say other religions have that too. Presenting unbelievable things to the point where actually I don't believe them. Talking about the other religions, not our religion. But I would posit other religions also have that. All right. So if nobody's going to be a taker over here, I'm just going to have to.
How about the 10 Commandments?
10 Commandments. Are they the core principle that's unique? A lot of other religions claim them too. So I wouldn't put that as a core principle that really differentiates us. Now, what's something that we don't proselytize? That is very unique. Actually, we don't proselytize. That is actually kind of related to the core principle that I want to present here. Some might say monotheism, but it's not unique to Judaism either. Islam is definitely monotheistic. So I'll go with this. Awaiting the Meridicea, maybe you mean the Messiah. Awaiting the Messiah. Other religions also believe in the Messiah. You have Islam is waiting for the Messiah. I think Christianity is waiting for the Messiah. It's a topic we discussed at length in the Journey to the Soul. Note takers? All right, reward and punishment. Reward and punishment with Judaism is very different than other religions. If you look at other religions, they view reward and punishment as you're good, therefore you get rewarded with eternal bliss. You're bad, you're utterly damned, or you get terrible things. It almost seems like, whereas in Judaism, as we discussed at length, we believe that reward and punishment is not so much reward and punishment as much as it is a consequence of our actions. The example that we have given, consequences versus reward and punishment, is if a kid steals a cookie, you might put him in timeout. That's a punishment, okay? That's not a consequence. A consequence would be if you don't sleep, you're tired, or you do sleep and you're refreshed. That's the big difference between reward and punishment and consequences. And so in Judaism, we view reward and punishment as a natural consequence for the actions that we are doing. And that is really unique to Judaism, I believe, from what I've seen. And whereas in other religions, it's all about doing the right things so that you can merit some eternal bliss. In other words, the goal is the eternal bliss. Judaism, we focus very much on the actions we're doing. The fact that the reward is there shows how powerful the action is. Not necessarily that I do the action just for the reward. When we understand it in this way, this will also help us realize that if we can understand the reward in Judaism, or as we're presenting it now, the consequence of our actions, then we can understand what we're trying to accomplish. So in other words, let me say it in other words. Since in Judaism, the reward is actually a consequence of our actions, so it behooves us to look at the ultimate end of everything, our reward, so to speak, because if we understand our reward, then we understand what is it that we're doing now, right? So if the end game is, right, if let's say the end game was, we're all going to be well rested, we would understand that in order to get there, we have to sleep, okay? So if we can understand what is the end game of Judaism, the Messianic era, what is the final end of the Messianic era, then we can understand everything that we've been doing till then, because that's supposed to be a lead up to the end game. Follow? Yeah. So what is the end game? In our previous classes, we've been discussing how the end game is the Mashiach, but really within Mashiach, the end game, the final stage of the Mashiach is a stage we didn't talk about a lot, and that is the era of the resurrection. The resurrection is actually the ultimate and the final stage of the Mashiach. And so therefore it behooves us to understand the resurrection, because if we can understand the resurrection, because that's where everything's leading to, then we can understand how do we get there, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to the point of resurrection. So understanding resurrection is not just, in other words, what I'm trying to present to you is studying the resurrection is not just an abstract study. It's a study that helps us understand what we're doing right now, because what we're doing right now is leading to that place. You follow? So I'm going to say that one more time. Understanding the resurrection is not just a discussion about a nice, beautiful reward that awaits us for all of us that do God's will, okay? Understanding the resurrection helps us understand how I live my life right now, because how I live my life right now and how we as Jews live our lives leads to that point of the resurrection. So now, let's get to our first text. And unfortunately, they didn't share with us this time the textbook by PDF, so I had to take pictures, but I think it looks good enough. So this is the text. The first one we want to share today, this is from Maimonides, and it says, the ultimate of all reward and the final good that will have no end or decrease is the life of the world to come. Now, the word world to come, as we will see as the class goes on, will be debated what it actually means. What is the world to come? World to come sounds like it's in the future. Does that mean it doesn't exist now? Is it something that's going to come in the future? But as we said, I'm telling you the answer, world to come is resurrection, but not all opinions agree with that, as we will see. But if we can understand the ultimate reward, the world to come, we can understand how we live our lives today. So, that being said, let's go on and discover the world to come. And ultimately the resurrection. So let's start over here with resurrection, okay? Resurrection, as you may know, is one of the principles of Jewish faith. Here you have from Maimonides. Anybody here has ever seen Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith? We've discussed it a couple times. Maimonides, in his commentary in a certain area in the Talmud called Sanhedrin, wrote up 13 principles of faith. And the final principle of faith is, I believe with a complete faith that the dead will be resurrected at a time of the Creator's choosing. Blessed be his name and exalted be his remembrance forever and ever. So resurrection of the dead is a pillar of our faith. Anybody here ever pray the Amidah, the daily prayer, the Shemona Esrei, the silent devotional prayer? It has so many names: Amidah, Shemona Esrei, silent devotional prayer. The Amidah, the pinnacle prayer that we say every single day. The third blessing we say in that prayer is what? Baruch atah Hashem echayeh mesim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who revives the dead. And so we see clearly, it's something we mention 3 times a day, every time we pray. And so we can see clearly that resurrection is not just a side belief, but it's an important belief to the point that it's in the first 3 blessings of the Amidah, the first 3 blessings of our devotional prayer every single day. So let's stop for a moment and think, what is this resurrection? Okay, typically a lot of people, when they hear the word resurrection, they think of Christianity. In fact, leading up to this class, I looked up for, a lot of times I try to Google jokes. I can't always, in my rabbi database, I don't have good jokes. I tried Googling resurrection jokes. It didn't work out very well. There were a lot of Easter jokes, weren't very rabbinic. Didn't work out very well. So a lot of people, when they hear the word resurrection, they think of Christianity. So first we're going to have to go into what is the source of resurrection in Judaism. But before we go to the sources, I want to repeat what we said till now so people aren't lost. We started off this class really saying what makes Judaism unique. It's our view of reward and punishment. And our understanding of reward is that reward is something that we work towards and it's a consequence. Therefore, we want to understand the end game, because by understanding the end game, we'll understand how we get there. And what is the end game? The end game is the world to come, which we will present as the class goes on as being the resurrection. And so now we're going to do a deep dive into the resurrection and the sources for the resurrection. So there's a question out there. Does the resurrection have any basis in the in Judaism? Where is the source for resurrection in Judaism? So first, let me show you one of the most clear sources. This is in the book of Ezekiel. Oh no, this is a resurrection story. I shouldn't say the source of resurrection. This is a resurrection story. This is in the book of Ezekiel. If anybody has ever read chapter 37, a fascinating account, very fascinating story. We read it, I believe, in the Haftorah on Pesach. It's a story of God came to Ezekiel. Ezekiel came to a valley. It was a valley full of dry bones, and God made them all come to life. Right? And it looked and said, lo, sinews were upon them, flesh came upon them, skin covered them from above, but there was still no spirit in them. And then it continues, and the spirit came into them. And so we have over here a clear story of resurrection in the books of the prophets. Story of resurrection that happens. We have other stories of resurrection in the books of the prophets. Elijah resurrected a child. Elisha resurrected a child. But where is there sources that there's going to be a resurrection in the future time in the coming of Mashiach? So actually, you have over here, this is from Chabad.org. You can find this online. I can send you the link if you want. Maybe I'll put in the chat. This is a nice collection of the sources of resurrection as the Talmud discusses it. Whoops, putting that in the wrong place. Just put this in the chat. There's a lengthy, lots and lots of proofs for the resurrection, all here from the Talmud, and they're bringing it from different verses throughout the books of the Torah. Now, here I collected a couple of the ones that I think are the most clear. So, for example, one proof is it says in the Torah that you shall give these tithes to Aaron the priest. Now, it was talking about the tithes that they were going to give in the land of Israel. And we know Aaron never made it to the land of Israel. So how's the Torah saying you shall give these tithes to Aaron the priest? It should have said you should give these tithes to, so to speak, the Kohanim, the priest. Why did it say Aaron the priest? And so this is one proof that there's going to be a resurrection, and one day we will give Aaron the tithes. Another proof it says over here, it says in the Torah, and I've established my covenant with them, referring to the patriarchs, to give them the land of Canaan. It doesn't say to give their children the land of Canaan. It says to give them the land of Canaan. And so we learn that one day they will come back alive. There's an interesting, here, this is a section from the Talmud too. There's an interesting one in the Talmud that says, somebody asked the rabbi, says, how could resurrection make sense? And the rabbi answered, if people who are not born yet will be born, then logically people who have been born once can be born again. Okay, don't mean any Christian reference, but logically people who have been born can be born again. Interesting, just a logical proof to the fact that it can happen. And when you think about it for a moment, by the way, if resurrection baffles you, how about creation? If God can create the whole world and create life, I mean, what's resurrection? No big deal, right? Here's another interesting one. There's a verse that says, I kill and I make alive. Our sages commented, one might understand this to mean I kill one person and give life to another, as is the way of the world, that one man dies, another is born. The same verse that therefore goes on to say, I have wounded and I heal. Just as wounding and healing obviously refers to the same person, so putting to death and bringing to life refers to the same person. This is an answer to those who maintain that resurrection is not intimated in the Torah. So this is in the Torah, where God says, Ani amit, I put to death, really. I make people die and I make alive. And so what it's saying is actually the same person who will pass away is the same person who will live, and so on and so forth. You can find so many proofs within the Torah. The most clear one, and I was looking for that one, it says, V'kitzu v'rananu shochne afar. I think it's actually a text. Oh yeah, that's the next text we have over here. The most clear one in the Torah actually is this one over here. This is from the book of Isaiah 26:19. This is not in the Torah, this is in the prophets. We showed you some of the verses from the Torah, but a very clear one. It says, may your dead live. My corpses shall rise. Awaken and sing, you who dwell in the dust. And so this is pretty clear. He's saying those who are dead are going to live again. For a dew of lights is your dew, and to the earth shall you cast the slackers. Don't be a slacker. What that's saying is not everybody's going to come back. If you're a slacker, you may not come back. And that brings in a whole section of Talmud, which discusses how some people will not be resurrected at the time of the resurrection. What happened to my, just 1 second. Okay. And so this is a very, very clear proof of resurrection in the Torah. And just something interesting to share. There's actually debate as to why not debate. There's a question, why can't we say that all these verses about resurrection are metaphorical? If you recall earlier, Maimonides said that some of the promises about Mashiach can be metaphorical, like the wolf shall lie with the lamb, can refer to nations getting along. So why don't we say that resurrection is also metaphorical? And Maimonides gives a very interesting answer. And he explains that although generally, if we can have a rational approach to a verse and something more literal, if we can have a rational approach to a verse, that's what we prefer. But when it's very clear that something is literal, you go with the literal explanation. And since a resurrection is everywhere, and also it's not necessarily unbelievable, because if God can give life, the first time he can make you be born again. And actually, Rabbi Saad Yugon, another great rabbi, added on, of course, we don't take everything in the Torah as metaphorical. If we did, then there would be no Torah left. If everything in the Torah we don't like was a metaphor, then there's no Torah, there's no instruction. Generally, Rabbi Saad Yugon actually gave 4 general rules when we take something as a metaphor. A, if it contravenes reality, which resurrection doesn't contravene reality, because if God gave us life the first time, he can give us life the second time. B is if it doesn't make any sense. And again, for the same reason I mentioned above, this can make perfect sense. God creates the world, he can create us again. 3, we say something as a metaphor if another verse contradicts it. Or number 4, if we have a tradition against that meaning of the verse, but there is no tradition against resurrection. So again, resurrection is clear in the verses. Everybody agrees, even Maimonides, who takes a lot of the prophecies of Mashiach as a metaphor, does not take this as a metaphor and understands it literally. Okay, somebody asked over here, you don't understand about the slackers. Why won't everybody be resurrected? Why won't everybody be resurrected? I don't want to get too off topic, but there is a Mishnah. There's one Mishnah that says everybody has a portion of the world to come. And then the next Mishnah says, except for X, Y, and Z. Except for, there's a list of people who won't have resurrection. Now, just for clarity, the Rebbe has a lengthy letter, which he wrote in the 50s, I think, maybe even the 40s, where he qualifies, and really, even though the Mishnah excludes a lot of people from the resurrection, the Rebbe qualifies that Mishnah to really make that list very small. But again, that's not a discussion for now. But rest assured that pretty much everybody will be resurrected, okay? Or maybe that's bad news for you, I don't know. Okay, no, I'm kidding. So let's continue on over here. All right, so what we've established so far is, again, as I said, Judaism believes reward punishment, it's a consequence, so we have to understand the ultimate stop on the road to understand how we're leading to it. The ultimate stop on the road is the world to come, which right now we're presenting as the resurrection. So first, we got into the discussion of resurrection. Everybody believes the resurrection is a principle of Jewish faith. There are so many verses that point to it, so many sources. I put a link in the text if you want to see all the sources in the Talmud. But now we want to understand in depth. Let's now understand, why is the resurrection so important? So let's start with an exercise. This exercise is, we're going to put over here a list. This list lists a bunch of activities that you can do as a Jew. And I want you to put in the comments or tell me which one you think is the holiest and which one is the unholiest. So you got Yom Kippur, steak dinner, living room, Purim, To Kill a Mockingbird, sleep, prayer, baseball, helping someone cross the street, eating matzah, video games, spending time with family, lighting Shabbat candles, skiing, visiting someone in the hospital. On your holiometer, which one do you think is the holiest? And what do you think is the least holy? You can say or you can comment. But let's take a look here. So spending time with the family is the holiest. Okay. Hopefully you have well, some people's families, right? No, I'm kidding. Some of my brothers I want to hang out with, not the others. No, I'm kidding. For those who know, I've got 6 brothers. Okay. Any others? No. Okay. Yom Kippur, followed by Purim, followed by family time. Okay. Interesting. Helping someone cross the street. Skiing sounds very holy. Well, skiing, I would say, is holy, except skiing sounds very unholy because you're actually going from somewhere very high and going very, very low. I don't know if that's a good thing. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Any other thoughts? But I guess you could look at skiing as kind of similar to the soul when it comes down to this world. It descends very far down, right? Okay, so I've got a lot of nice answers, and obviously everybody here has been hanging around Chabad for a while. So what a lot of people believe is that Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, which it is called the holiest day of the year. And it's the holiest thing that you can ever do. Whereas, let's say, probably we'd put To Kill a Mockingbird at the lowest, but people will put sleep pretty low, and skiing visit, a steak dinner, we'd put pretty low out there. And when we think about it, Judaism is about being holy, right? It's about holiness. Holiness, we equate typically with spirituality. And when we think about it, when we pass away, as we discussed, where does our soul go? Our soul goes to a very nice, beautiful spiritual world, the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And so the question is, the premise of resurrection doesn't make any sense. If the soul works hard to reach a level of spirituality and spiritual connection, divine connection with God, it heads out as it passes away to heaven and hangs out with God. It gets all the spiritual goodies hanging out with God. Why does it need a resurrection? Why would the soul want to come back to this earth? What is here on this earth that it needs? It's got everything it wants up there in heaven. And in fact, many people live their entire lives just to get to heaven. And so there's even precedent for that in some of our books. And so the question is, what is the purpose of resurrection from a philosophical point of view? And let me just show you this text over here. This is puzzling. It's from Rabbi Meir Ibn Gabbai. Inasmuch as the soul is bound up with God in a bond of eternal life and experiences intense spiritual delight, isn't that the greatest rest and reward ever? Why would the soul descend from such a lofty perch to return to her body that decays and turns to dust? What's the point? I hate to break it to you, the body does turn to dust. Okay. Oh, someone put out of here, prayer, Purim, Yom Kippur, and Shabbos. Yep. Definitely all holy things. So we're at a point where we want to understand philosophically, why is the resurrection so important? We understand it is the end game. We understand there are sources for it in Judaism, but we want to understand philosophically, why is resurrection such an important thing? So let me just check here if there's comments on 1 second. I don't even know how to. Okay, so let us explore first. As usual, anybody here ever hung around rabbis? Do they typically agree or disagree? They typically have trouble agreeing, right? They say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So as we're going to explore now, there is actually 2 major opinions in the resurrection of the dead. And basically, pretty much based on this question we said a moment ago, what's the point of the resurrection? One rabbi says, actually, the resurrection is not the end goal, because the point is to be spiritual, and spiritual is not with the body. Let's take a look. If you recall, I said earlier, the world to come, there's a debate what it is. So let's read here Maimonides. Maimonides says, in the world to come, There is no body or physical form, only the souls of the righteous alone without a body, like the ministering angels. The ultimate of all reward and the final good that will have no end or decrease is the life of the world to come. So Maimonides says, what is the world to come? The world to come, the ultimate end game, is a world where there is just a soul and no body, and the soul will live forever in ultimate bliss. Now, you might say, well, then why is it the world to come? Isn't every soul that passes away now, aren't they already in the world to come, right? In other words, if we understand the world to come as the world of resurrection, well, then it's a world to come in the future. It hasn't come yet. But if we understand the world to come as a world of souls, well, anybody that's passed away is there. So the simple answer to that question is, yeah, world to come can mean personally. It's the future for every single person. It's your future. Your future of the world to come is when you pass away and you get to the afterlife, as we call it. And the afterlife is the ultimate goal and the ultimate purpose of where we're all going to head. So again, Maimonides says the end game of everything is not resurrection. The end game is a soul without a body. But this will bring up a very serious question, which is, wait, but we know Maimonides does believe in resurrection. So how does that fit in his world vision? In other words, if Maimonides believes in resurrection, so what is the end game? So what we're gonna be resurrected and die again? Like, what is his vision of resurrection? In fact, there were some people who took this text and they started to decry Maimonides as a heretic. They said, what's with you? You're writing over here, the ultimate goal is a body without a soul. You don't believe in resurrection. You're a heretic. It's heresy, and all the nice names that we know how to call each other. And it got so bad to the point where Maimonides had to write a couple lengthy responses showing and proving that he believed in the resurrection. He wrote one lengthy response to the Yemenite community called Mamar Techiyat HaMesim, the treatise of resurrection of the dead. And he also added a lengthy scholarly explanation to the book of Sanhedrin. And let's read a little bit about what he writes over there. So Maimonides first qualifies and says why he believes what he said. So again, Maimonides does believe in resurrection, but he first says, why do I believe that the ultimate goal is not resurrection? Why does Maimonides believe the ultimate goal is a soul without a body? And he says that we believe resurrection is the ultimate goal because we can only perceive pleasure as physical beings as being physical. We can only understand reward in a physical way. And that's why he's saying it's a human weakness to believe that resurrection is the end goal. That's his opinion. He says, because we live as physical human beings, we can only imagine that a reward is going to be physical. You ask anybody and you ask them what heaven is, and they'll tell you, oh, well, heaven's a place where they've got lots of good custard donuts, and they've got, whatever physical pleasures, which some I'm not going to get into, some physical, but whatever the physical pleasures are people describe. And that's what Maimonides says. It's a weakness that we have. So let's read what he says. I shall now begin to treat the subject that I originally intended. Know that just as a blind person can form no idea of colors, nor a deaf person comprehends sounds, nor a castrated man feel desire for sexual intercourse, so the bodies cannot comprehend the delights of the soul. Just as fish do not know fire because they exist in its opposite, water, so are the delights of the world of spiritual unknown to this world of flesh. Indeed, we have no pleasure in any way except what is bodily, and what the senses can comprehend of eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse. Whatever is outside of these is non-existent to us. We do not discern it, neither do we grasp it at first thought, but only after deep contemplation. It cannot be described, neither can anything be found to compare with it. It is, as the great prophet exclaimed, when admiring its great glories, how great is your goodness that you have laid away for those who fear you, that you have worked for those who take refuge in you. And so what he's saying is that the ultimate reward of the soul is something that we cannot fathom, something we cannot see, something we cannot understand, because we live physical lives. But he still contends the ultimate goal is the soul without the body. And that's a pleasure that we don't understand, which is why we typically would like to think that resurrection is the ultimate goal. Now, Maimonides continues on and clarifies, nevertheless, I still believe in the resurrection, as he writes. The resurrection of the dead is a fundamental principle transmitted to us by Moses, our teacher. However, bear in mind that all people must eventually die, dissolving and returning to the matter from which they were formed. So he says, there's going to be a resurrection, but then we're all going to die again. And then we'll go back to the world of the soul. And this brings, let me just show you the last text as the Rebbe clarifies, not the Rebbe, the third Chabad Rebbe explains what it means. In other words, the resurrection of the dead will only be temporary. Thereafter, we will all return to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, which is the ultimate true good, otherwise known as the world to come. So this brings us to a very puzzling picture. Maimonides' picture is a little puzzling. So, all right, we live our lives. Then at some point we pass away. We head to the Garden of Eden. Then one day the Mashiach comes, and these poor souls in the Garden of Eden are going to be pulled back down into a body. And then they'll live here on this earth for a little while, and then we'll all die, and they'll go back up to heaven. All right, so it's good and fine for those who haven't died yet. But for those who have died, why do they have to bother having a downgrade to have an upgrade? What's going on? It's like, well, you want to get the iPhone 12. Well, first, let me give you the iPhone 7. Let me take your iPhone 10, and then you get the iPhone 12. I mean, like, what's going on? And this question is very problematic, which is why the other opinions have a different opinion about this. But just to give a little sense to what Maimonides is saying, just one possible answer is to say that we know that this is something we discussed in previous classes. We cannot keep the mitzvahs in its perfection until the Mashiach comes. Until the Mashiach comes, we cannot fulfill the mitzvahs properly. And so since the life of the soul without the body is a reward for the good deeds that we did, these souls that have been in heaven will have to come back down to this earth after the year of Mashiach, when the world will be in its perfection. They will be able to do all those mitzvahs they weren't able to do before in its perfection, and then they will pass away to get reward for all those mitzvahs that they did. Just one possible explanation of Maimonides and his understanding of the resurrection. So again, his understanding of resurrection is the world works like this. We're born, some people die along the way, they go to the Garden of Eden, spiritual benefits. Eventually, one generation will bring the Mashiach. After the Mashiach, at some point, there will be a resurrection. All the souls will come down to this earth. And then, after I don't know how long, we'll all die, and we'll all head off to the world of the spirit. And we'll all enjoy the fruits of our labor from here on out. So that's Maimonides' view, which is a view, but it's not the main view. Maimonides was obviously a great person, but now we will go into, as Judaism loves to do, we'll go into Nachmanides. Okay, so we'd love to confuse you. Maimonides, Nachmanides. The major opinion that disagrees with Maimonides is Nachmanides. Just to explain why they called Maimonides and Nachmanides. Well, the Rambam's father's name was Maimon, so he got the name Maimonides, and Nachmanides' father was Nachman, so he got the name Nachmanides. That's really all it means. So we're going to take a look over here at the other opinions. So according to Maimonides, so far what we have is there's the world to come, which is a world of souls, which is the Garden of Eden, and resurrection is not really the ultimate goal along our path. And so really, I think if you were to, so to speak, be a Maimonidean, you would like to look at this Mishnah, which I'll put up here on the board. This is from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, which says, Rabbi Jacob said, this world is like a vestibule before the world to come. Prepare yourself in the vestibule so that you may enter the banquet hall. In other words, this world is just a place where you have challenges so you can overcome, so you can get the ultimate reward in the world to come. This world's not so important. As we'll see, we don't really like that view, that world view. So let's move on over here to Nachmanides. For those who want to know, Nachmanides, if it's not confusing enough, was also a doctor. He was a doctor. He lived from 1194 to 1270. He was the leader of the Iberian Jewry. In 1263, he debated in front of King James of Aragon. He debated a fellow Jew about Christianity, a Jew who called himself Pablo Christiani. And although Nachmanides won the debate, there was no winning the debates in those days. If you lost, you lost. If you won, you lost. You know, and what are you going to do? You live in the country over there. So he had to run away from Spain, and he moved to Israel, and he helped reestablish Jewish life in Jerusalem in the year 1263. So let's take a look at what Nachmanides has to say about the matter. So he says like this. It is abundantly clear that the term world to come used throughout rabbinic literature is not the spiritual world of souls and the reward that they earn immediately after death. Rather, it is a world that God will create in the future after the Messianic era and during the resurrection of the dead. So he's already blowing out what we've said till now. He says, world to come is literal. It's world to come. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in the future. Now he says there are 3 stages. 1, the reward for the soul and the world of souls is called in the language of our sages Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, and it's times also called Aliyah on high, or the heavenly yeshiva. So he's saying there's a place where the souls go when they pass away, the Garden of Eden, heavenly yeshiva. 2, thereafter Mashiach will come, and thus begins the phase of the world to come, Olam Haba. And 3, the climax will be the day of judgment and the resurrection of the dead, which is the reward bestowed upon the body and soul. This final stage is the ultimate goal and the hope of every believing Jew. It is the world to come, a world where body and soul will both return. The soul will climb to great heights in the spiritual perception and delight, and both will endure forever. So if you're sick of your body, hate to break it to you, but your body and your soul, they will endure forever. So if you have self-image problems, time to get over it. Got to get used to it, you know. This is the you. There's no swapping out the you. I'm sorry, you can't get a better model. It's not like the resurrection comes. Okay, you'll get rid of your illnesses. Granted, you get rid of your illnesses, but you're not going to swap yourself out for a better model when Mashiach comes. You know, it's not like those video games, right? Before you play Mario Kart, you get to choose your what car you want to go in. Anyways. So what Nachmanides is saying is and by the way, Nachmanides says this, and this is ultimately the opinion of the Kabbalists, and we like to follow the Kabbalists, like the Arizal. What Nachmanides is saying is that Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, and Olam Haba are separate things, and ultimately, yeah, we pass away, we get some reward in the world to come. Sorry, in the Garden of Eden when we pass away, and we get the ultimate reward when Mashiach comes. I just want to mention something not really officially part of this class, but it is mentioned that the reward we get in the world of souls is more a reward for our Torah that we study, which you can understand. Torah is more spiritual, and the reward of the Mashiach and the Messianic era and the resurrection is more of a reward for our mitzvot, for our good deeds, which mitzvot are more physical. Just putting that out there, which should be a lengthier discussion for another time. So here's a question. If the body and the soul are going to live forever, what's the point in the body? In other words, or let's put it in other words, what's the body going to do? You know, the body and the soul are going to live forever. It's obviously not a very physical life. It's a life of the body and the soul, which as Maimonides said earlier, it's a world of no eating and no drinking. That's a text that we all agree on. It says the world to come is a world of no eating and no drinking. So you're going to live with a body and a soul, but the body is going to be kind of soul-like. It's going to be alive, but not from eating and drinking. Maybe not from breathing either. Maybe that's why it's not a problem if we get rid of all the CO2 or whatever is oxygen. No, not a problem. We don't. No, I'm kidding. Maybe we don't need to breathe too. So Nachmanides explains that the body will actually be refined to such a degree that it will be sustained with a spiritual energy, just like the soul. So So again, the body is going to have a spiritual energy just like the soul. And there's a good example for this. Do you know of anyone else who lived with a body and a soul for a long time without eating? Any takers? Anybody knows? Can you think of someone who lived for a long time without eating or drinking? Any takers?
Well, isn't a child before he's born? He doesn't
Any takers?
breathe. He,
Sorry, a child before they're born?
A child. Yeah.
A child before they're born, well, they're eating from their mother. I'm asking, is there precedent in Jewish history of somebody being alive without eating and drinking?
The people in the Exodus.
People in the Exodus, they ate the bread falling from heaven. All right, I'll give you a clue. There was someone who lived for 40 days and 40 nights without eating and drinking.
Oh,
Any takers?
Moses.
Moses, very good. Moses went up to Mount Sinai, and he was there 40 days and 40 nights, and he didn't eat. I think there's also a story in the Talmud elsewhere about Elijah, who lasted for 40, not in the Talmud, in the Tanakh, Elijah, who lasted 40 days and 40 nights without eating and drinking. And so we see there's a concept of someone who can be physical being, but yet survive without eating and drinking. It's some spiritual energy. And although we don't understand it, but just as resurrection in general is miraculous, that will also be something miraculous. But again, you can ask the question, well, if the body is going to be soul-like, then what do we need the body for? In other words, so yeah, we answered, okay, the body and the soul are both going to live forever. But what's the point of the body if the body itself is going to be like a soul? And the answer to that, you're going to have to get to Hasidic philosophy, because that answer will not be found in the Nachmanides. You're going to have to get to the Kabbalah, and more importantly, the Hasidic philosophy of what's the point in having a body that becomes spiritual, so to speak. So let me just pause here to recap, because I know we could get very, very lost. Today we discussed that we want to reach, that in Judaism, a unique idea is our understanding of reward and punishment, and reward is a consequence of our actions. And so if we can look at the ultimate reward, we can understand how we're going to get there. And so we discussed resurrection as the ultimate goal. We presented, of course, Maimonides' presentation, which is that actually resurrection is not the goal. It's going to be a life of souls. But that is not the majority opinion, not the majority of the Kabbalah. The ultimate opinion is that resurrection is going to be the ultimate goal. We're going to live here with the body and soul forever. And so now we have to ask the question is, what's so important about this resurrection? And what's the point in having this body and soul to live forever? And once we understand that, we can understand how we're getting there. So to answer that question really harkens back to a discussion we had in the last course, which was called This Can Happen. In that course, we had 2 classes on a concept called Dira B'Tachtonim, a dwelling place for God here down on this earth. It's something you will hear many times if you go to any Chabad house, that what's God's desire in creating the world? To make for himself a home down here on this earth. That's why God created all of the worlds. God desired to have a dwelling place and a home on this earth. We discussed it at length in classes 2 and 3, and you can find the recordings if you want. But to give you the short version, the Cliff Notes version of it, is God wanted that he should be manifest in the lowest world. Okay, there's higher spirituals, but God wants that in this lowest world, he should be manifest. There should be an awareness of God on this low world. And we asked, well, why? What does he need from it? And the ultimate answer is, well, that's just what he wants. And what he wants, you can't ask why he wants what he wants. Let's take a look over here at the famous text. We did give us some explanation, but again, ultimately boils down to that's what God wants. All right, this is what God wanted: to conceal and hide his eternal light, so that thereafter, through a lengthy process of spiritual evolution, a lowly material world could be created. God wished that humans should work to make a home for him in that world, to transform darkness into light and realize the abundance of light that comes specifically from a place of darkness. What, then, you may ask, is the purpose of this superior light that comes from darkness? The answer is, so is what God wished, and it transcends all reason. So we know in our lives that we appreciate darkness that comes from light. Sorry, light that comes from darkness. When you're in the dark times, then you overcome. We feel an appreciation for that. But remember, before God created the world, that appreciation didn't exist. Everything that we know, any logic we know, even 1 + 1 = 2, is something that God created. So the fact that we can appreciate good that comes out of bad, that's something that God created. And so we don't know why, but that's what God wanted. And so God wanted that he should create this world, which is dark, where there's a lack of awareness of God. And through the mitzvot, through the commandments and good deeds, we bring an awareness of God in this world. And that's what it means to make a home for God in this earth. We gave the example of the piano, right? The piano was a great example. We said, imagine you have a piano. It can be sitting in a world of people who don't have an appreciation for music. So in that world, people will look at this piano and they'll look at it and say, wow, that's a beautiful table. And then you can have the piano in another world, which is full of woodpeckers. And the woodpeckers will look at the piano and say, wow, this is beautiful dry wood. We can really peck away at this. That's their appreciation of the piano. And then you can have the piano in a world of people who appreciate music. And somebody sits down and plays it and everybody listens. And then everybody really appreciates what the piano is about. And that's really what it's about. This world naturally we look at the world, we're like woodpeckers. We look at the world like, what can we get out of it? How much food can I eat? How much pleasure can I have? And we have to bring the awareness that there's a music behind everything. There's a godliness behind everything. The items that are here are for God and for God's home. And so since the day of creation, we have been in this continuum of trying to bring this awareness of God within the world. And the ultimate perfection of that, when we make this world a home for God, when the full awareness and the realization of the purpose of everything in this world is for God, will culminate with the coming of the Mashiach. That's the ultimate stop on the train station. When we come to the ultimate place where we bring an awareness of God in everything. And when we come with this understanding that the point is to take a physical world and transform it into a home for God, then understanding that resurrection is the climax now makes sense. If the point is to bring an awareness of God within the lowly physical world, to bring an awareness of God in a world that naturally has no awareness of God, then of course, the ultimate goal is going to be down here on this earth, where it naturally was not aware of God, and now we have the home of God here on this earth. And that's why it just makes sense. The resurrection of the body and the soul will be forever, because that's the goal. The goal is to have a world, a physical world, which has an awareness of God, a world that naturally would be antagonistic to God, and yet have a understanding of God. And so every time we do a mitzvah, we're bringing awareness of God. However, as we mentioned last time, sometimes the awareness we bring in the world is hidden. When Mashiach comes, it culminates and it becomes revealed. This also explains, by the way, in a very simple level, why we'll live forever when the Mashiach comes. Once that moment comes, that the world is a home for God, obviously evil is going to be eradicated. And evil is the reason why people die. If you recall in our course, Secrets of the Bible, class number 1, we discussed how when Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, they mixed evil into the world. And once there's evil, evil is a disconnection from God. And that's why things die. There's a mixture of evil in this world. But if the world is all godly, then nothing dies. In fact, there's a midrash that says that when Eve gave Adam from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, she fed all the animals in the world too. That's why animals also die. It says there was one animal she didn't give it to. It was a bird. And this is a bird that every thousand years bursts into flames and regenerates from its ashes. Sounds like a phoenix, right? But it's a midrash actually. It talks about this bird that didn't eat from the tree of knowledge, and therefore it lives forever. And so with this, we can understand why resurrection is the ultimate goal. Because it's not that we are overcoming challenges so that we can get reward. It's not that we're overcoming challenges so that we can prove our self-worth and our soul's power, and that we get rewarded for overcoming our challenges in the world to come. We're actually accomplishing something here on this earth. It's not you do something and therefore you get rewarded for it. It's not, that's really the difference. That's why I started off with. It's not, Maimonides' view actually kind of seems like the reward is separate from the work. You did a good job, I'll reward your soul. You know, you did a good job, you overcame temptation on this earth, I'll reward your soul in the world to come. Where the reward is not so much connected to the work. Nachmanides' view is that the work that we do is very much related to the reward of the body and the soul. That's what we were trying to accomplish the whole time, to bring a revelation of body and soul, to bring a revelation of the spirit within the matter. That's what we're trying to do. Let's take a look over here at some text. Good evening, Rav Chunya. Okay, so let's take a look over here at some text. All right, so the reason for creation in general, and humans in particular, is because God wanted a home specifically in this lowly world, low not in terms of space, as there is no higher low before God, rather low in stature. The idea is that this lowly material world be subsumed in the godly reality. This transformation is the purpose of the Torah mitzvot. This then is the reason why Torah mitzvot were given specifically to human beings in a physical world, who with their physical bodies deal with physical matter so as to transform what appears to be apart from God to an absolute vehicle of godliness. That's what the Torah is given to us, not to the angels. The angels actually complained. They said, you should give us the Torah. And Moses said, wait, the Torah says, honor your father and mother. Is that a challenge for you? Do you have a father and mother? The Torah says, don't steal. You have anything you own, you somebody owns, you want to steal? Let's read this other text from the Rebbe. The entirety of creation is advancing up the ladder of perfection and gradually becoming more refined. In terms of world history, this elevation has 3 rungs. One is the present era. Number 2 is the Messianic era. And number 3 is the resurrection of the dead. In the first era, the period before the advent of Mashiach, the world is preoccupied with a constant battle between the forces of good and evil. Sometimes the forces of good triumph, and other times the opposite. During the second era, the Messianic era, the battle against evil has been won, and we will be redeemed. In the third era, the period of resurrection of the dead, evil will be utterly eradicated. The world will know neither sin nor death. We will then receive unimaginable and incomprehensible reward. This reward will be granted to the soul in a body, for at that time the original purpose for which the universe was created will have been fulfilled, to create a home for God in the lower worlds. I want to add one element here that's not written here. It's in other places in Hasidic philosophy. It actually says when Mashiach, I asked earlier, how is the body going to exist? And I told you, well, we see Moses was able to survive without food and water. It actually says that right now, actually, what gives life to your body is your soul. Now, although you say I have to eat, Kabbalists explain you eat to create a good bond for your body and your soul. But what really gives you life is your soul, right? If a body has no soul, it's dead. The soul gives life to the body. The food is just to keep the body healthy so it can hold on to the soul. It says in the times of the resurrection, it'll work the other way around. The body will give life to the soul. Again, I'll say that one more time. In the resurrection, the body will give life to the soul. How is that so? When the ultimate revelation, when the world will be revealed to its truth, it will actually be revealed that the body is more godly than the soul. This goes back to our discussion earlier. This might confuse you, and I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent. I just felt I wanted to share this idea. But the body is actually more godly than the soul. How so? If you recall in the previous discussions, we've discussed how the soul, how spiritual, anything that's spiritual at the end of the day hides God a little bit, because it's kind of quasi. It says I'm spiritual, I'm something special. But at the same time, it's not the ultimate. It's like the higher spiritual worlds. They're more spiritual than us, but they're not God, right? They're more spiritual, but they don't have a full awareness of God. It says that the physical reality of this world is the most godly thing that there is. Why? The physical world is the only existence of all the worlds where the things look like they don't have a source. What do I mean? It says in the spirituals, if you were to live in a spiritual world, there are spiritual worlds. Gan Eden, let's say. You live in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Everybody sees how they're coming from God. Everybody sees their source. It's like you'd feel you're a ray of the sun. You cannot live in the spiritual world not realizing you're coming from God. the fact that this physical world is able to put on a show that as if we come from ourselves, as if we don't have a source, the fact that the world and people can put on such a show is because we're so godly. Just as God has no source, the physical world also feels like it has no source. And that's because really behind it all, we're so godly. So again, just as God has no source, in other words, God didn't come from something else. Nobody created God. God always was and is and will be. We as physical beings have that feeling too, because we are actually more godly than anything spiritual. And so the deeper meaning of our feeling that we come from nothing, or that we have always been here, is the deeper meaning of that is that we're so godly that we have that same feeling that God himself has. And so that's why when Mashiach comes, when the real reality of the body will be revealed, when the real reality of the body, that it is really spiritual, then actually the body will be more holy, more godly, I should say, than the soul, and the body will actually nourish the soul and not the other way around. Now I know that it's confusing, but hopefully you grasp onto the idea a little bit. So in conclusion, we've discussed today that resurrection is really the ultimate goal according to most opinions. That's where we're heading to. And what is resurrection? Resurrection is a culmination of what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to make God a home in this physical world, in the world which naturally doesn't exude godliness. We're trying to bring an awareness of God within this world. And therefore it makes sense that the ultimate stop of this world is resurrection, a world in which the body and the soul will live forever, where there will be a physical world, but the physical world will live with the full awareness of God, and there will be no evil, and therefore things will live forever. So we don't need to leave this world, because this world really is the goal, is the purpose. So it wouldn't make, if this world was the goal, it wouldn't make sense. We would make the goal and then leave it, right? If here is the goal, why would you make it and then go, right? It's like, it's one thing a builder, right? So a builder, he builds a building, he gets his money, and he goes home, he brings his money home. But if it's your home, if you're building your home, then once you build your home, you live in your home. And so that's how we look at it. It's not that the reward at the end is unrelated to the work that we do. That would be like the builder. No, we're going to be living in that home. We're going to live in that goal. We're going to live in that reality that we are building right now. It's our home that we're going to be there, one with God. And so this can change the way you live. This is why I asked in the beginning, what to you is more holy? What to you is more holy in your day? Is it Yom Kippur? Is it Shabbat? Or some people said it's family. It could be skiing. It could be eating. Skiing is very, very holy if it's done in the right way. All of these things can be very, very holy. Just, if you go to the gym, some people go to the gym, they go like the Greeks. They go to the gym, they worship their body, they worship, how they look and how they feel. And it's all about them. That's what the Greeks were about. They started the Olympics. And in Judaism, going to the gym is not necessarily unholy. In fact, Borough Park is full of kosher gyms. If you go there, they don't have TVs over there. You can watch Rebbe videos on the screens over there. But you can go to the gym, and it says, as Maimonides says, being healthy is godly. Being healthy is godly. So what I'm trying to present here is that if the ultimate goal is the resurrection, then we should realize the spirituality within our physical life. We have to find the spirituality within our physical life, because ultimately that's the ultimate goal. Yes, there are some people who live a more spiritual life, but they're really only there to be our inspiration. But most of Jewry will always be the hardworking. Most of Jewry will not be living, so to speak, this 365 days a year spiritual life. Most Jewry live and work within the world, because that's the ultimate goal. And so next time you go to the gym, next time you go for a drive, try and realize, how can I live the resurrection now? How can I live in a way that I'm going to find God in the mundane? Because ultimately that's the ultimate goal. It's easy to find God when I'm studying Torah. But if that's the only time I find God, then I'm living Maimonides' paradigm. But that's not what we're seeking. We need to seek the Nachmanides paradigm in our life. We need to find the God within our life. We need to seek the paradigm of resurrection. If we want to get to the resurrection, we got to live the resurrection. And for an action, one action that you can do, a simple action, is how you wake up in the morning. Waking up in the morning, it says, is a little bit like resurrection. God gives you life again. You wake up in the morning and you say the Moda Ani, you say, thank you, God, for giving me life. You're setting your foot on the right path, because what you're saying is not, oh, let me run somewhere. You start off right in the morning and saying, I am getting up with a recognition of God, and that I'm here on this earth today, right now, to serve God. Modani lefanecha, I admit to you, Melech Chai the living King, Shechazarta bi Nishmasi, who has returned my soul, Bechem Rabba, with great mercy. Rabba Monasecha, great is your trustworthiness. And so may we all live a resurrection lifestyle every single day of our life. May we get up in the morning, say the Modani, appreciate the blessing of the resurrection we have each and every single day, and allow it to permeate our day. And if we all do that, we will speedily bring the times of Mashiach and the ultimate stage of Mashiach, which is actually the point of resurrection. Thank you for coming tonight. And we'll see you again next week, Wednesday night. But for that one, we'll be there 7:30 p.m. And please God, there won't be any games. And the Lightning should win in 4 games. Okay, we'll pray for that. See, I have a spiritual reason. To pray for the Lightning, so nobody should have to be disturbed. You see that? Spiritual reasons. And we'll see you. We got 2 more core classes on resurrection. And the reason why we're discussing these topics now is because it is the 3 weeks. It's the period of mourning that we are praying for. During this period of mourning, we're praying for the Mashiach to come back, rebuild the temple, and bring the times of Mashiach. And that's why we are taking time to study it now, to really bring into our consciousness and focus on the future, not just more in the past, but hopefully focus on the future. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to stop the recording.